rotunda out there in, so we're going to get started just here in a few seconds. Make sure and stick around afterwards. We've got snacks out here and cider and coffee and water. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and we're ready to go, Linda. I think we're probably live now, so I'm going to get started. Good evening. I'm Mark Broman. I'm the Executive Director of the Wachiska Audubon Society. I've been here for just over a year as Director, but I've been a member for 15, 18, maybe 20 years. We welcome you to our December meeting. I want to welcome everyone that braved the elements and came in tonight. And I know we've got a lot of people out there joining us electronically, so welcome there. Wachiska is an independent chapter of the National Audubon Society with a geographical area covering 17 counties in southeast Nebraska. You can follow us on our webpage and on our Facebook page. Our president, Teresa Pella, couldn't make it today. She's out of state, and so she asked if Marilyn McNabb was going to be here, and I'm not sure. I don't see Marilyn in the audience, so I'll go ahead and make the one announcement I think Marilyn was going to make, and that's the next board meeting is going to be on December 20th at 7 o'clock, and that will be by Zoom. So again, December 20th. Next month's program will be Danielle Esterdale from First Star Fiber in Omaha, and she's going to talk about the new machines that they've just purchased to use the plastic from those orange energy bags. Have you seen those energy bags that you can put certain plastics in that are not recyclable? Anyway, Omaha's been doing it for a few years. Lincoln's got a few people using them, but anyway, they're going to take those orange bags and turn them into plastic lumber that's used for decks, picnic tables, benches, and those kinds of things. I went to a presentation the other day and got to see the material. It's pretty neat, but they're using it on a lot of decks and things like that. But they're going to use those plastics that we can't use for anything else. They call them energy bags because people were using them to burn, to use for fuels in certain industries. So this is even a better use because we're not putting all the pollutants up in the air. We'll take just a minute tonight and see if there's any unusual bird sightings. I know Ed Brogy reported yesterday that he saw a tundra bean goose at Graceland University Pond in southern Iowa this week. So that's the one bird that I heard about. Did anyone else have anything spectacular or maybe even something just large numbers? I heard some people talking about the Los Bluff National Wildlife Refuge where they had 706 bald eagles the other day, 14,000 white front geese. So they had some big numbers down there, but they fluctuate day to day. So does anybody out in the audience have a bird sighting they want to mention? Tim, go ahead. Okay. Some of the late migrants are still slipping through, so anybody else have anything way in the back? Oh, did you say red-breasted nuthatches? Yep.
Well, Linda and I were down at Los Bluffs yesterday, and a lot of things had fled the scene, but of the 704 reported the day before bald eagles, we logged in 336 of them.
Okay,
so
that's pretty good. Yeah.
So it was a good day.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, I'm going to go through. Oh, go ahead. Yep.
Well, this wasn't recent, but it was a shocking thing in spring. I saw a pileated woodpecker here in our yard in Lincoln.
Wow, a pileated woodpecker. I know they've had them over at on the Platte River, over by the Exarban Aquarium, Schramm Aquarium, but I hadn't heard of any in Lincoln.
I've seen one in Lincoln before.
Yeah. Well, nice. Good sighting. Okay. Well, I'm going to take just a few minutes and go through our annual report. We've got 13 slides, I think, and so we're going to do that before we do tonight's presentation. So I think Linda has it up on there, so I'm going to just go over a couple things. So the first slide, we did change the verbiage on our mission just a little bit. So if you read the mission and say, wait a minute, there's a few words appear to be different than in the past. But anyway, so we did make a few verbal changes and got approved through the board and then the membership. The next slide is we've got a 17 county service area, which I mentioned earlier. So there's the counties that we currently operate in. And then the next slide is the 2022 Board of Directors for this current year. Of course, we do have 6 brand new members, which I'll talk about later, that will be here for 2023. So we have some big changes in the board coming, but that's our current board that's listed up there. The next slide will be the Wachiska operations. So staff, again, I've been here for just over a year on staff. Arliss has been with the office for a long time. Arliss is here tonight. She's the office administrator and the person that keeps things running and does the Babbling Brook and lots of important things behind the scenes. Then as far as administrative and management partners, you can see we've got Nancy Hamer does our bookkeeping. We have Rediger does our CPA support. HBE does tax filing. Stingray Technology does our IT when we get into jams. which is frequently because I'm not an IT person. So when we need that little bit of extra help, we go to Stingray. Prairie Legacy, Kay Cotis supports our prairie owners. We're doing some work with some of the easement holders along with work on our 9 prairies. The Northern Prairies Land Trust, they manage the Wachiska-owned prairies. That's something that just came about this past year, so that's something new. So they're actually managing the prairie with their staff. They're based out of Beatrice, and they've got a long history with prairie management. So they're working with Kay Cotis and us on some of these other projects, so it's good to have her aboard. And then Zukowski Weber, Katie Zukowski is the lobbyist that we use in conjunction with some other folks. We did partner with Ducks Unlimited and others, but this year we've got a separate contract with State Audubon, which is now the Great Plains, and ourselves in the Omaha chapter. So we use Zukowski, and also Ducks Unlimited uses her also, but we had some different issues, and so we have different contracts this year. So just to keep you updated on that. We think there may be some things coming up this session, so stay tuned, watch the Babbling Brook, and we'll try to get alerts sent out too on our email list. Finances. The operating budget was a little over $200,000. We got membership, Birdathon, Give to Lincoln Day, and then to date we've got donors have put $63,800 have generously donated. We got approved a 3-year grant with the Nebraska Environmental Trust. The first year is $46,000. We hope to get that year 2 and year 3, and that's to work on our easement properties and our prairies, doing some management things. The NRD's partnered with us, and that started in May of 2022. So hopefully we'll get year 2 and year 3 and can continue that. The next slide is the 2020 strategic plan. We've got 4 focus areas. The first one was building relationships. And so here's the accomplishments and the ongoing. So the accomplishments, the bird field trips resumed in February. We'd been on hiatus for a while there. In-person monthly meetings resumed in October. They've been hybrid like tonight, so people are online and also in person, which we're glad you made it out tonight. Then we've also got board members and executive director met with Audubon, Nebraska, Audubon out of Kansas, and the Omaha Audubon Society, and talking about partnership possibilities and things that we can work on together. We initiated a partnership with the Reconciliation Group with the Oto Missourian tribe, so you may have seen that in the newspapers or on TV. That's been a very positive experience. They met with us out on Deacon Prairie and then later came over to Knott Prairie, and we're very excited about coming back to their homelands. They were in these parts until the mid and early 1800s when they moved first down by Barnston and then eventually all the way down to Oklahoma. So this is the first time they sort of came back with a larger group, and they're trying to establish some connections back to their home ground. Ongoing, complete research for online membership database, matching volunteer interest with organizational needs. So if you have an interest in something with the organization, be sure to let us know. Call the office and talk to Arliss or I whenever. And we always can use volunteers. And I know Linda can use some help on the membership too. She's always inputting data, and there's always a lot of work to be done there. We're developing a one or more college chapters. We're talking about Omaha did that. The Audubon Society of Omaha started a chapter with UNO, and we're hoping to do that in Lincoln. We've got some younger board members. They're just recent graduates from the University of Nebraska, so I think that's a very good possibility that we can get a chapter. I talked to Larkin Powell last night, in fact, and he said he's very interested in getting a chapter going with some of the wildlife students, so that's something we're preparing for. And then probably the most important thing coming up is we're planning for the 50th year anniversary. Next year is our 50th anniversary, so that's a big, big deal. So we'll hope to have a big event, have a speaker come in, and so we'll see where that's at. But watch the Babbling Brook or keep an eye on our Facebook page, and we'll give you more details. The next slide is the advocating for the environment. So we have accomplishments. We had the Vote for Climate in Mind yard signs, and we still got some of those left. I know we just went through an election cycle, but if you want to put some out in the spring when the city of Lincoln has their elections, or just want to have one on hand, they're $10. We have them in the office. We still have a few for sale. Continued support for the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. We submitted letters to Congress and our senators and congressmen, and we're pushing, and they're hoping to get that passed by the end of the year. And if so, it means about $14 million a year for Nebraska. It'll come through the Game and Parks Commission, and it'll be working with species that are high risk and in need, not necessarily just endangered species, but species in conservation need. So we should be able to apply and get some of those funds and work on our prairies and some of our easements. So that would be a good thing. And then I'm not going to go into each one of the LBs. There's LB 1135 and 1251, 1255, and 925. But we know there's going to be more coming this year, so we have to be ready. It's the long session, so it'll be a 90-day session. We have a lot of new senators. So then the next is the strategic plan focus areas. Number 2, continue advocating for the environment. So what we accomplished, participated in 7 nature nights. Tim Knott was in charge of those nature nights, working with the NRDs in Ashland and in Lincoln, and out at, we had another city, trying to think of the other city, Ashland, Lincoln, and Elmwood. We had 2 after-school programs in Arnold Elementary School. We did something with the summer school kids out there too. Tim and I did. We received a grant from the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission to get backpacks for the students that have bird books and binoculars and insect nets and things like that. So that was exciting that we got that. We held 3 Prairie Discovery Days at Deacon and Knott Prairies for 4th graders. 180 students or more were involved in that. 6 sites were on the tour of the wild side, approximately 240 visits. We participated in nature events at Walt Branch Library, Friends of the Whitehall Mansion, Indian Center, and FFA convention downtown in the Pinnacle. We also have ongoing things, building volunteer base for projects, and meld the populations environment with the education committees into one. So now it's going to be called the Education Outreach Committee, and we elected, we've got co-chairs. We've got Bruce Melberg and Tim Knott are co-chairs for that group. So they'll have a position on the board, and so that's the group that is those 2 former committees combined into one. Then the next one, the third, is Caring for Tallgrass Prairies. We approved the 3-year NET grant, which I just mentioned, entered into an MOU with the Prairie Legacy, that's against Cape Codas, to coordinate improvement work with landowners on those prairies that have those easements. In the past, we haven't provided funding to those folks, but now we're trying to provide like a 50-50 match for tree removal, invasive species control, some replantings, things like that. So we're working hard with those folks. Some people are very anxious to work with us, and others, are the 2nd or 3rd owners, and so they don't know what this easement's really about. And so to them, it's kind of foreign. So we just need to reintroduce ourselves to them and let them know we're here to help them. We're not here to we want to use the carrot instead of the stick method with them. So we're going to try that first. But in the rare case that we can't work with them, we may have to go back and look at the language in the original easement and see what we're allowed to do and not do as the easement holder. We received a $25,000 endowment from Rosalind Morris Estate for the conservation of prairies and woodlands in southeast Nebraska, so we'll get the interest from that every year, so that was a very nice gift. We've held OLLI classes about tallgrass prairies, including a field trip to Deacon Prairie. Tim was part of that, and Ross Scott and Sue Guild, so they had an in-class session, and then they were out on Deacon Prairie, so that was a nice event. Update the website to include maps and GPS locations. We've got a couple newer members and board members. Ethan and Dakota have put a lot of work into those, along with some of the other members. Ongoing partnership with the Boy Scout camp in Richardson County in support of the student survey work, continue efforts to ensure prairies will be protected. And then Tom Wiesling, an entomologist, is going to do some insect surveys on some of our prairies. The next slide, we've got Caring for Tallgrass Prairies. We dedicated 2 prairies, and so I'm glad to see we've got Ernie in the audience tonight. We've got Ernie and Arnold Mendenhall. We dedicated 2 prairies for those, the long work, long hard years that those folks have put in dedication to Wachiska and our prairies, so we really appreciate that. And then number 4, strengthening internal operations. Members approved a revised constitution and bylaws, so we just updated those and got that approved by the membership. We joined the Give Nebraska, which is an organization we belonged to about 7 or 8 years ago, and we finally got back involved with them, and so we're going to give it a shot again and see. They have a lot of folks that they get money from, that they solicit money from, different businesses like Kawasaki, LES, Lower Platte South NRD, but it's across the entire state, and people can contribute through their at-work payroll. So we're hoping to continue that project and get a lot of donations through them. Review investment strategies with the Lincoln Community Foundation. So we looked at how our investments are made, made sure that they were green. We weren't investing in dirty energies, as they might say. And so we reviewed that portfolio, which the Lincoln Community Center was already sort of going that way. So we looked at those investments. And then we revised a vision statement, which was on that front page that we talked about just briefly. An ongoing dialogue regarding the origin and meaning of Wachiska. We've had some debate on what Wachiska means, where it came from. We haven't really got an answer to that yet, but we're also awaiting the National Audubon Society's decision regarding the future use of the word Audubon. So there have already been some Audubon chapters across the state or across the country that have dropped the name Audubon, and National Audubon is actually considering that too. So we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out, and then we'll have to address that as the membership here and see what we want to do. But it is a very controversial thing right now, and so we're going to wait and see what happens. But there have been a couple chapters that have dropped the word Audubon because of John Audubon's work in the past with owning slaves and some things like that. So anyway, that's up and coming. Implementation of revamped financial reports. So Dylan is our new treasurer, has been for not quite a year, right at a year, and he comes with a good accounting background, and so he's working with our financial people, the finance committee, and doing a lot of good stuff. And the board's working on solidifying fundraising strategies. So of course fundraising is key, and so we are always looking to see what we can do in that realm. Then the next one, we've got a couple thank yous. The outgoing board members, Bruce Kennedy has been a long-time board member. In the past, he was the chairman of the legislative committee, so he was on the board, and then he became an at-large member. So Bruce is going off. Lana Novak, Linda Brown, who will continue to be with the membership, but the membership will not have a position automatically on the board, but she will be part of the membership and heading that group still. Linda Pollock, and Linda Plock's in the back here, and Linda was our secretary this past year, and so we appreciate her service, and she's going off, and April Stevenson's coming on, and then Marilyn McNabb is going off as vice president. So as you can see, we've got a lot of change coming. And then we also wanted to mention a couple volunteers tonight. Some special thanks to Cheryl Moncure, who did hospitality for a number of years, and so she is now leaving the hospitality committee. And if anyone's interested in doing that, which is basically helping us set up before meetings, tonight it was Arliss and I and a little bit Linda, and then cleanup, which will be Arliss, Linda, and I after the meeting. So if anyone's interested in that, be sure and let us know. We'd love to have some help setting up and taking down. And then John Carlini and Sherry Schwartz were the birding trip people for years, and then they stopped when COVID hit, and so they're not going to continue doing the birding, but we appreciate the service, the many years, and the many good trips that they provided. And then Mary Rogie was the past treasurer, so we want to thank Mary for her work. And then we sort of have a couple special recognitions on here. Don Pepper, we were going to try to have Don come in tonight, but Don's been undergoing some health issues lately, and so Don wasn't able to make it tonight. But he's done a lot of pro bono legal work. And this past year, we did a lot of work with Fertig. We acquired a little over 3 acres up there, and that took a lot of negotiations. We had a lawsuit going on with some drainages and some water and all kinds of issues. And so Don, over the years, has done tremendous work for this organization, legal work. And so we want to thank him for all of that work. He's also our landlord where our office is, and he's been very nice, and our rates have been very good. And so we appreciate that he's been a great landlord over the years. So we just wanted to recognize Don Pepperell and his wife Joanne for the service to the Wachiska. And then the last person on here is Elizabeth Nelson. She's the one that received the NET grant, the Nebraska Environmental Trust Grant. Worked really hard the last couple of years, had a grant that got turned down a couple of years ago, and went back to the drawing board and worked on it and got it accepted this past year. And she's the person that's administering that grant now. She puts a tremendous lot of work into that, and she also helps with the finance committee an awful lot because she has a good background in that. And she also provides the place where we have our seed sales. So it's her building that we use for seed sales, so that's great. But she does help the finance committee a lot, and so we wanted to recognize Elizabeth Nelson for her hard work. Then the last slide, here's a quote on here that was on an NPR story from the Odo Missourian group that was up here at Knott Prairie out by UTAN this fall. And so that kind of just brought back to me, that these folks are really happy to get back here, and they were really happy that Wachiska opened up their prairies and were willing to allow them to come back. They collected some plants that day on the prairie to take back home to do some medicinal things with. There's medicinal plants that they couldn't get. And some of them, they had some little kids that were 4 or 5 years old running around the prairie, and some of the elders came up to me and they said, that's what it's about, seeing the kids running across this tall grass prairie. It brought tears to their eyes, and it was quite touching. So we're really happy to have done that. So with that ends my spiel on the annual report. And again, Teresa would have done this, but she's out of state, unfortunately. But we got through it, and so I also want to make sure that you don't forget that we've got, afterwards, we've got coffee, cider, and treats out in the hall. And then another quick announcement, there will be 2 open seats on the Lincoln Airport Authority this spring. And some people might say, well, why is Mark plugging the Airport Authority? Well, the Airport Authority is in charge of 9 Mile Prairie and all the land around there. And Wachiska's taken an interest in trying to protect 9 Mile Prairie. And because of Ernie and Arnold and Tim and people like that in the past, we've had a lot of protection that we've worked on with the 9 Mile Prairie folks. And so we want to protect that asset. And so if someone's interested in running for the Airport Authority, it'd be nice to have someone on there who would care about some of the environmental concerns, because the Airport Authority has a large area out there in Air Park that covers a lot of territory. So just want to put that quick plug in. Reminder that tonight's presentation and past presentations are available on YouTube. So you can go back and review these, and you can see my ugly mug on your home screen if you want. But with that, I think we'll get to why everyone's here tonight, and that's it's my pleasure tonight to introduce tonight's speaker, Jason St. Sauveur, and he said it's easier just to say Jason the Bird Nerd, and that's how most people know him. Jason is the Senior Education Manager at Audubon Great Plains. I say Audubon Great Plains because the state Audubon now is part of South Dakota and North Dakota. So, Crystal Stoner is now part of Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota. So we call it the Audubon Great Plains. And so he's from the Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center. And I'll let Jason give a little more background maybe if you'd like, but I don't want to take any more time from him. But again, stay afterwards and help us, eat the treats out there. And thank you again for coming out. And Jason, I'll turn it over to you now.
First, I'm going to test the microphone. Might need to turn it up. Testing. 1, 2. Hey, there it is. Can you hear me? Yeah. Excellent. Next question. Linda, can I scooch these? Do they need to stay right there if I walk here?
You can move them. If somebody wants to talk, there's a microphone on there that you can just pull off and hand it, and Bruce can run around with microphones. Otherwise, people on the live stream can't hear.
Perfect. No, I have a feeling I would have walked right into those and there would have been a big crash on the live stream, and nobody wants that. How's everybody doing? Thank you for coming out. And for those of you on the live stream, wherever you are, welcome, and I hope you enjoy. My name is Jason the Bird Nerd. As you know, I have seen and met many of you. Many of you I may not have, but I hope you enjoy this. I put together this presentation. I love doing this type of work. This is integral to what I do out at Spring Creek all the time, which is community engagement. Birds are my favorite thing in the world, and every time I think I know a lot about birds, I put another presentation together, maybe with a new topic, and I learned something new. So I was really excited to do this. Arliss asks every so often, she's like, can you do a presentation? I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do one. Because I love doing this kind of work. So I hope it's enjoyable. It's nothing earth-shattering with all kinds of data and new science. This is just gonna be for fun. And it's based on the old song, the 12 Days of Christmas. Not all of those are birds, but a lot of them are, and it made me think, well, what if I change the other ones into birds too, and we have a little fun, talk about the song and the birds. So, you guys ready for that? Does that sound all right? Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, let's see if our clicker will work too. Will it reach? I've got I think you have to hit play one more time up top, Linda. You're on a side slide. Nope, all the way up to the very top in the middle. Go across to play. Do I have a? Right there. Do you see the little red light? Right here. Come down. And to your right. Little far, oh, too far. Right there, hit that one. There we go, thank you. Now we got it. All right, let's see if we can go to the next one. It's not finding the slides. Linda, can you scooch that laptop up, or is it up?
It's up.
Okay, you can move them if you want. I'll just tell you next, that's great. So there's me, right? Anybody recognize where I'm at, if you can see that picture? Any guess? It's not Nebraska, if you weren't sure. That is the beautiful island of Hog Island, Maine. There is an Audubon camp there, and if you've never had the chance to go, I highly recommend it. They do many types of camps through the summer where you stay from a week. You can learn about birds, you can learn about education, conservation, you can just stay there for fun. It's a beautiful spot. I chose that photo because it's one of my favorite of me. Audubon uses it to learn about careers in conservation. Mike Fernandez, who works for headquarters of Audubon, took that a few years ago when I was out there, but it shows me in all my bird nerdiness, I feel, right? I've got my guide out, I'm all happy, I've probably just seen a really cool bird. But I realize when I do these sometimes, I just say that and not everybody knows why I even call myself the bird nerd. Like, who is that guy? Go ahead, hit the next one for me. So, anybody know where I'm originally from? Arliss knows. Yes, exactly. Northeast South Dakota. right up near the border of North Dakota. We used to joke that we actually were the Border Patrol keeping the North Dakotans where they belong up there. Way up in a little town named Britain. Oh, now it's going to go. I got it, Linda. It's going. All right. Anybody know how long I've been with Audubon? It's all right if you don't. About 10 years now. 2023 is going to be a big year for all of us. Wachiska turns 50, Spring Creek turns 25, and I will be in my 10th year at Audubon. So it's a pretty exciting year next year. I'm excited about it. Lots of fun things I've done with Audubon on the way, too. Career in Fish and Wildlife Service for many years before that. Anybody know what I did before conservation and education?
New York actor.
Yes, very good. Oh, Artis has done her research. I was in New York City for about 13 years trying to do music and theater. It was a lot of fun, and I've never been more poor. But I realized I couldn't quite pay the bills, and then when I was not doing the music and theater, I have always loved the outdoors. I was obviously having the acting skills. Being in front of people was really easy for me, and I had a real passion for birds and nature and teaching kids and others about that. So this was a perfect fit, finding a job with Audubon. Oop, I probably need to stay over there. Works better over here. Spark bird. Anybody know that phrase? Have you ever heard the phrase spark bird? So that is something we use in the birder world, and it can be with nature, anything too, but what got you into your career, or what's that bird that made you like birds so much that you wanted to write every last bird down, which I do. Anybody take a guess? It's not a big flashy bird, and they just got back to Nebraska a few weeks ago. Yes, very good. Dark-eyed junco. Everybody see dark-eyed juncos around lately, right? Little sparrow on the ground. My mom calls them snowbirds. A lot of people do, right? As a fun name for them because they arrive as it starts getting snowy. Little gray on the back and white bellies. One of my favorites, it's my spark bird, or the thing that got me into it, because my grandmother had a bird feeder. She was the one that noticed I really liked birds and gave me my first golden bird book, right? Do you remember those? They were about this big, had only about 26 birds in it. But junco was the first one I figured out. I didn't know what it was. I knew a cardinal, I knew a robin, but that bird flew into her feeder, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. And I looked through my book and found it, and I was so excited to figure out it was a junco. So that was my first bird. That really sparked my interest. And last but not least, anybody know why I call myself the bird nerd?
It fits.
It does, thank you. I'm glad. There's another reason. And I like to tell people this because it's a part of who I am and about rest of what we're going to do all night, which is education. So I realized early when I was working with inner city kids in New York City, I worked in an after-school program. Then it was about theater. But that being nerdy and into science, it was not cool. And I'm like, that's not true. It's super cool, right? Especially like getting out, digging in the dirt, walking through a prairie and looking at bugs. It's really, really fun. But if it's seen as uncool, so I decided to be a bird nerd because it immediately takes a barrier away from being Mr. Saint Solver, right? With kids especially. And then I could just be Mr. Bird Nerd, and they like thought that was fun and funny. And it got them engaged in science, in being outside and looking at nature instead of thinking of it as teacher and student. So it's a little just different way to interact, and I've found it very successful. And no one has complained. It seems to fit, right? All right, let's get to the serious stuff. Oh, the really serious stuff. Anybody ever noticed all my silver teeth? Sometimes you don't, right? Because you kind of don't see me that close that often. But I had, as a child, all silver teeth. I only have some now. Anybody know why? Yeah, all my teeth had silver crowns. This is probably way more information than you guys thought you were going to get tonight.
You drank well water.
They could do it, yeah. It actually is something I was born with. My dad had it, his mother had it. It's called ameliogenesis. And it's part of what makes me, the bird nerd. But it means I have no enamel. Just born without it. So all my teeth since I was a baby were soft, so they had to cover them. And so it's always lived with that. But it's one of those things that kids notice more than adults. I'll be out teaching with them, and they're like, look, he's got those fronts. They think I'd put them on to look really cool and like I'm very urban. I'm like, that's not it. But thanks for thinking I'm cool. Anyway, let's get over with me. Let's talk about some birds. You guys all know the tune, right? On the 12th day of Christmas, my true love, right? Did you realize originally it also wasn't my true love, or we're not positive it was my true love? There are many versions of this song back in the 16 and 1700s before it was ever really written down. And many of them had my mother gave to me or my father gave to me instead of my true love. Basically, the first published version that is known currently was about 1780. And the words also didn't say on the 12th, it was just the 12th day of Christmas. There were also slight differences in tune. That tune that is famous now, there it is, 1909. So much later, when Frederick Austin wrote that tune, set the lyrics that we know now all down on paper. Everybody knows it, and that's the most common one that we all know today. But it was very different before then. Lots of different colloquials you could put in there, because it was very also British. I mean, it came from the UK originally, came over with folks as they moved to the United States. One of the things that is different is also, it's actually not calling birds originally. That is a mistake in hearing, and then it just stayed. It was collie. No guesses yet. We're going to talk about what it was when we get to that bird, so don't jump ahead. And as we mentioned, right, a bunch of the days are not birds at all. Lords of limping and milks, maids of milking and all of those, but I'm going to change them into birds in just a second. And come on, you can do it. What happened? It's going along. There it comes. So let's start with 12 drummers drumming. I want you guys to feel like you can guess. Some of these will be easier than others. Pick a bird that you think might be a drummer. Yeah, I heard it. Woodpecker. Good one. Woodpeckers. There's probably others, right? But woodpeckers drum really well. In fact, they drum specifically as a way of communication. A lot of people think, oh, I can hear a woodpecker. It must be making a hole, right? Maybe. Could be eating. Most often, it's communication. It is a form of talking to other woodpeckers, especially territorially. Males and females, if they've got a really good snag and there's great grubs in there for food, they will bang on that and tell others to stay out of the area. That's their tree, right? Especially the large woodpeckers like that pileated you were talking about, right? Does anybody know how many species of woodpecker breed in Nebraska? No wrong answers. There's not a buzzer. You don't lose any money.
3.
More. Way more than 3.
8.
Close. It is 7. Now, there are more types seen in Nebraska, but 7 breed in Nebraska. Let's see if we can name them all. Red-bellied woodpecker. Who's seen that one? It's one of my favorites, right? They make that really loud brrr, right, in the spring and summer, and now they chuck all the time when they're talking to each other, right? Chuck, 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 chuck. They kind of laugh at you. Rarely do you actually see that beautiful red belly like you can on that one. It's not super well named. We get a lot of people will be like, oh, I saw a red-headed woodpecker, until you tell them, no, that's that one, right? Much better named. Funny enough, during bird sightings, I almost mentioned this one, we have a pair staying at Spring Creek still. So these are migratory, unlike the red-bellied. Red-headed usually migrate away. We know Indian Cave, sometimes Fontanelle Forest will keep a few through the winter, but normally they leave Oklahoma, Texas, etc. But yeah, we have a pair still there. Decided to keep in a snag. They must be still getting food. Very possibly climate change related. There's a lot of reports showing that northern ranges of certain birds is moving north more and more because they can. It's warmer through the winter. There's still bugs to eat, so they can do that. But yeah, we have a pair still out at Spring Creek. One of my favorites. Very, very fun to see. Anybody know what the young ones look like? They don't have red heads. Yeah, it's just sort of a browny gray head instead, if you see them in that first year. Hairy and downy woodpeckers, probably the most common. Everybody knows those, right? Especially the little downies if you've got feeders. Did you see those reports? I bet you did, because Wachiska just posted it on their Facebook today, too, which is awesome. They're not as related as we thought. They look like they must be super closely related to each other. And in fact, all the research now is showing they have evolved separately to look like that because it is advantageous as a woodpecker. The one on the left, the big one, the hairy woodpecker, is much more related to the red cockaded woodpecker, and the downy is related to nuttall's and ladderbacked, all the little ones in south of us, which is crazy. They're not even like super close cousins, and they look that close alike, which is weird. Flicker, beautiful bird. Question for the birders in the room. Anybody know which shafted northern flicker that is? Red or yellow? Yes, red. You can tell by the red malar line. Even if you can't see the wings, there is a little red down there. That's the way to tell. This is a male. The male has that line right here on its chin. It's black if it's the yellow shafted, which we see around here, and it's red if it's red shafted. And then the female doesn't have that at all. She's all gray. And then the big, and wait for it, I'm going to call it pileated woodpecker. Now let's start an argument. No, let's not. I'm just going to tell you why I call it pileated, and you can call it pileated all you want. So I learned a lot of my birding from a mentor way out on the bluffs of Massachusetts. His name was Trevor Lloyd Evans. He was Welsh. And this bird ultimately was named with that word because a pile is a red cap. At the time that the Brits came over here and the first time they saw it, its crest reminded them of a red pile, which is a military cap. So ultimately, he's like, it should be pileated. But like with many words, like my home state's capital of Pierre, everyone says Pierre, so everybody has changed it to pileated. Either way, it's a really cool and super big and loud woodpecker. Anyone seen one in Nebraska? I know you've seen one. Spring, yeah, right? Either up near Fontenelle Forest, Nebraska City, or Indian Cave. They really like the Missouri Valley. They need big trees because they make a big mess. If you've ever seen the mess they made after they destroy a tree looking for bugs, it's pretty cool. All right, let's move on from woodpeckers. There's one more. Did you know that the Lewis's breeds here in Nebraska? Very rarely. Way out west, about every year there are only about 2 or 3 nests confirmed. But it had to be up there because it's the Christmas bird. Look at those colors, right? Red and green is so cool. We don't see them here very often unless you got up to, was it Schramm Park? I think it was Schramm had one about 3 or 4 years ago. It was really cold and everybody ran up to the feeders to watch the Lewis's woodpecker up there. All right. There's a bunch of the other ones that have been recorded. We're a popular state for woodpecker, which seems crazy because we're mostly prairie, but evidently plenty of spots for woodpeckers. 11 pipers piping should be easy. Who knows what our piping, right? Everybody knows that, right? Piping plover, of course it is. Look at this adorable bird. Ooh. That's a big meal for that little bird, right? These are really, really fun. Have you ever watched them feed on the shore, too, if you get a chance to watch them? They do this really cool. They'll tap with their toes until like the worm or the little like macroinvertebrate decides to move, and then they can see it and grab it or feel it. So they do this great little dance. But really cool, sad story, though, of course. Almost all across its range, it's either endangered or threatened, and that's ultimately habitat loss. Thinking about Nebraska, they need sandbars, and if we're letting plants grow too much on those sandbars, or more likely with the plat, not enough water coming each year through the plat to wash the vegetation off those to give them nesting areas, then they don't have any place to lay their little ones and to run and feed. Oh, that's what I just mentioned. And anybody know where the piping comes from? Any idea how it got its name? Yep, it's exactly. They have several noises. The most famous one is listed as a peeplo. And it sounds like a little wooden pipe or a little like flute. They do a lot of them that sound like little bells. They're very, very talkative, especially when they have little ones. But it all sounds almost like someone's got a little like recorder tooting on it. It's pretty cute. Not easily found or seen in Nebraska, but we do have them. Some great places to look are along the Niobrara where there's sandbars. And actually some of the best nesting is the sand pits that they dug as they put the interstate that have, you know, the gravel. And I know a lot of the conservationists, Mary Baumberger Brown, before she passed, they've done a lot of work with those folks owning those to like watch for the birds, and if they're there, like report them. Really cool little bird. 10 Lords of Leaping. This one was a stretch for me to think of a bird. There's a really cool African bird that I almost chose, but I wanted to keep it to birds we could probably see or something, you know, a little more interesting around here, North America. Anybody ever seen those videos of that crazy bird that mates and it jumps up out of the grass and the female thinks that's cool? I chose something else. Any guesses?
Sandhill Crazy.
Oh, that'd be a good one. I did not choose that one. I should have. I chose the Lord God bird. Anybody know that bird? Ever heard that phrase? It is one we no longer have. It is the ivory-billed woodpecker. So it got the common or sort of colloquial name of the Lord God bird because it was so large when settlement was happening from Europe. People saw it and were like, Lord God, that thing's huge and loud. And then people just started calling it that. I feel like we're lucky that I wasn't there seeing it first because it would have had a much crazier name. Like it would have been like, G. Willikers, like some ridiculous name. That's where the name came from. Anybody see the reports in the last year of that it was extinct? Right? We've always been thinking for the past 20 years it was probably extinct. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service posted that they were going to mark it extinct. And in 3 months, April 2021, so not too long ago, some more researchers said, no, we think we found it again. And there's a whole bunch of horrible recordings and really blurry videos that there also might be Sasquatch and UFO in. I'm not sure. But you can decide. I have my opinion. I don't want to tell you. But I have a feeling that we've lost this bird long ago, unfortunately, and they are seeing pileated woodpeckers. But if you saw the news about that really crazy what was that bird? It's a ground pigeon, a rare bird that hadn't been seen for 60 years, and they just caught it on a trail cam in, I want to say, New Guinea, Australia. Is that where it was? So it happens. But really, really cool bird, even bigger than our pileated woodpecker, and especially you can see that really, really whitish, ivory-colored bill that it was known for. Lived in the south, sort of swamp forests along Louisiana, Georgia, that whole Gulf Coast area. But a lot of those woods were cut down, so there's not enough habitat for them. But there's still a chance it's still there, mainly because that habitat is really hard to get into, and so it's possible. All right, 9 ladies dancing. Any guesses on this one? Also not a bird originally. Oh, I should have done prairie chicken, except for the ladies don't dance. So I chose a bird where all the ladies do all of the work. They are the brightly colored ones, and they dance. So phalaropes are one of those group of birds, if you've ever seen one. We get this one right here in Nebraska. This is the Wilson's phalarope. Here you have the red-necked and the red. The red is crazy. Not only do they live way up in the tundra, in the millions, guess where they go for the winter? And we only figured this out in the last 20 years. Like hundreds of years, we had no idea where millions of birds went. Like they all thought they like buried in the mud or like flew to the moon. They just go to sea. Millions and millions of flocks of this bird, and they just fly out into the wide open ocean, and no one knew they were out there until we started using GPS, like backpack, and like, oh, why are they out there? And then they took a boat out, and they're like, oh, they are all out here. Like, who knew? But yeah, these birds are super cool because these are all the females, brightly colored. The males look very similar, but kind of like if you printed these pictures out in grayscale. That's what the males look like. Same shape, same pattern, but just all washed out in grays and blacks. But the females are all brightly colored. They dance around the male. So phalaropes do this, like constantly. If you've ever seen them feed, they create their own cyclone in the water. So they spin fast enough that creates a little cyclone coming up the little like water spout, and it brings bugs to the top, and then they just pick them off. So the girl, when she's the brightest when she wants to show off how quick she can spin, and the male gets so dizzy, and that's who she picks to mate with when she has literally hypnotized him, which is great. Right? They're really, really fun. I have a video of them dancing, but I don't know if we're going to be able to watch it. So I will just say, I think we're going to skip it because I have a feeling it's not going to work. but you should watch it. Google if you get a chance, if you have that ability, phalaropes spinning. There are hundreds of YouTube videos of that, and it's just thousands of them going like this in the water. I watched it for hours once because it was just, I'm like, I can't believe they're not sick. Like, how do they do this? They're really amazing birds. 8 maids a-milking, also not a bird. What do you think? What could I choose? I'll give you a hint.
Cowbird.
Oh, that's a good one. I like it. I didn't think of that one. I love these ideas, you guys. Cowbird. I didn't think of that one. Are there any, oh, that's also a good one. Goat suckers. Oh, right, the nightjars. You guys are smart. I love it. Are mammals the only animal in the world that produce milk? Thank you. Pigeons. We have a type of bird. All the pigeons and doves actually can produce crop milk, right? It is not, we know a lot of other birds have crops. That's that storage area right here. They can put a lot of seeds in it like a cardinal. Chickens and grouse do that. They put them right here. It'll later go down to their gizzard and get crushed up, right, since they don't have teeth. But if they need to store them, instead of being like a squirrel and putting them all in your cheeks, it goes into your crop. But pigeons and doves, there is something there that excretes and it starts to dissolve that food and it makes it even more nutritious. It becomes a milk. So they're not just regurgitating food, they're actually providing milk to their little ones. They don't do it all year long. It's only when they have young on a nest, but it is really, really nutritious. It's why, have you ever noticed, pigeons and dove breeds all year long, and they can have little ones growing in harsh conditions because they don't need as much necessarily food for themselves, because any little bit they get food and they can excrete and create that milk for the little ones. It's a really cool thing. How many pigeons do we have in North America? You guys didn't know it was a quiz night, did you? So sorry. I love quizzes. Any guesses? I think we've got 3 band-tailed pigeons out west. Everybody knows the first one, right? I need to go back. Oh, I went too far. Let's try this. Oh, I've totally ruined it. Nope, here we go. We'll get it back. That's the feral pigeon, right? That's the one you see all over in urban areas. Not originally from here, but again, they have a lot of really cool abilities. All the homing pigeons that are bred from them that learn memory and how to like take messages places. But there's also that band-tailed pigeon I mentioned out west, pretty large. I saw them up in Washington and Vancouver area. Beautiful white-crowned pigeon. Can only find them in very southern Florida, like the Keys. They tend to like very tropical areas, the Caribbean islands, Central America, but you can find them in Florida. And another one that is very rare, but you can find in North America, the red-billed pigeon. That one is in the Rio Grande Valley, all along the border of Texas, because it lives mostly in Mexico and Central America. But again, with climate change, many of these birds are sneaking into the United States, so there's chances to see them. They're very cool. Big fruit eaters, especially down there. Olives and small fruit off of trees, things like that. I wish we had that pigeon, right? Isn't that beautiful? Victoria crowned pigeon. There are several, this is from New Guinea, and there are several types of pigeons on that island, and they're all ground pigeons. They can fly, but they rarely do. And they're large and almost like the size of a pheasant, and they just run around, pick food off the ground. Really cool. Yeah, so don't disrespect your pigeons. They're awesome. And really good food for our peregrine falcons, if you like the falcons on the Capitol, right? We need them. This one should be easy. 7 swans are swimming. Guess what I picked? Swans, yes. How many of those do we have in Nebraska? Yeah, 3. We shouldn't have 3, right? This one is here only rarely, and usually only if it got here because someone brought it in. The mute swan is one of those European species, originally brought over to be on people's ponds because they're beautiful. They actually were on moats in a lot of castles in Europe, and they're very, very territorial. It was unfortunately my job when I worked in Massachusetts to lethally remove them from wetlands because they will chase every other wetland bird and or animal out of the pond. They want nothing else on their pond. So if you were trying to manage for rare common moorhens or little Virginia rails or American black ducks, you don't want mute swans around, unfortunately. But these two we have, and they're really awesome. Trumpeter's the largest, and that one does breed in Nebraska, right, out in the sandhills, not in huge numbers. Big numbers now, though, down at Les Bluffs, right? A lot of the trumpeters and a few tundras will head down and use the wetlands of Les Bluffs just south of us in Missouri. And if you want to know how to tell them apart, size helps. These guys are smaller. These are the heaviest birds that ever come through Nebraska, right? Not necessarily the largest. There are birds with bigger wingspans, but they are the heaviest. Tundra has yellow right there. This one does not. And it tends to have a slightly curved neck, just like this one does. And these guys tend to have a straight one. When they're feeding, they don't also sit still like this, so that makes it tough. But really beautiful. I love the noise. It's one I can't do with my voice, right? I'll make some bird noise for you in a second on another slide coming up. But I can't do swan. There's something about it. Swans and cranes, I wish I could make those noises, but can't quite do it. All right, we're getting down there, almost halfway through. 6 geese a laying, also not hard. Goosers is what I learned as a kid. I've always called them goosers, or honkers, right? Do you ever know people call them honkers too? But they are geese. How many geese species come through Nebraska? Not quite that many, half. About 5, right? Canada, by far the most common, and little cacklers becoming more common. Canada geese are so common and love urban areas. Anybody know why? Why do they love us so much? Well, there's probably lots of reasons. One, towns are warmer, and we have nice free yards for them to eat because turf grass grows back really fast, and the greener and newest shoots are the most nutritious. So they will just pick on them. So you see them on like the Hy-Vee lawns and all of the like urban pond lawns, just like hanging out and eating and in the sun. All you'd have to do, I see them always like, I lived in Utah for a while and worked, and they had all of these plans to try to move all of the, because they were becoming a pest, they were attacking walkers and doing all this stuff. They couldn't figure out how to get rid of them. All you need to do is plant some cattails or let the edge of the pond grow. They don't like to have their vision blocked, because then the predators can come after them, right? So they want those wide open ponds like we like, where there's no shrubs, no grass, like just everything short. So if you leave a little like at the edge of the pond, some cattails, some shrubs, they don't like it much. So cackler's a lot smaller, but literally looks like a Canada goose, about half the size, and literally the size of a duckbill. So pretty easy to see. Then you've got, who else do we got? We should have 2 more geese, snow and Ross's geese, right? Snow geese are pretty obvious from the air. This is also a Ross's goose, so these 2 smaller ones are Ross's geese, and the bigger one is a snow goose. Size is an easy way to tell, but they're not always together, so the best way to tell is, do you see, it's kind of hard in this picture, but right here on snow geese beak, you can really see that filtration. The like comb, their beak kind of makes this weird grimace. It looks like they're always looking like this for some reason. But it's where the water filters out and all the food stays in. It's like this comb, like this on geese and ducks, right? It's so that all of the little macrovertebrates and the plant matter they ate stay in their mouth and the water can go out. Because if you had to drink all the water and eat at the same time, you'd be huge, you'd like sink. That would not work if you're a goose. Yeah. And then this one, anybody know what you call this type of a snow or Ross's goose? It's not young. Some people think that's the young one. Yeah, it's just a blue. So they have morphs, right? That just means it's the same species, but they are going through a morph. It's not necessarily a molt, but they could just, a couple seasons, they may be in the blue phase, and then they'll get white or they'll be blue. Just depends. Sometimes it depends on diet, what they're feeling for the week, who knows. But yeah, that's still a snow goose or a Ross goose. They're just in a blue morph. All right, we're about there. Last one, my favorite goose in Nebraska, greater white-fronted geese. Moved through about a month ago. Sounds like there were a bunch down at Les Hills. Really cool. I learned them again with a colloquial term, which was tiger belly, because of all the stripes right here. A lot of hunters called them that. I always pick it out because they have a really high, kind of cackling laugh of a honk. Doesn't sound like, a Canada goose has that real nice wah, wah, right? This one is way up there. It's really high, and it sounds like all these tiny little kids laughing as they fly over. It's really cool. It'd be weird if a bunch of tiny little kids were flying over, so it's usually geese. But also, I didn't realize this was one of those things, as I was putting this together, I didn't realize, I knew this wasn't white, but I've just always pictured the name meaning white-fronted. But it's right there, Jason, right? That's what they mean. Big white patch right on the forehead as it's flying towards you is the white front they're talking about. Really cool geese. Any questions as we get halfway there real quick? Oops, I'm going backwards. Keep doing.
Greater white-fronted is a native goose.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. There is, so some people, and I'm just zooming the wrong way, so I'm going to fix that while we're talking. There are barnyard geese. They are domesticated version of gray-leg geese that look similar, but they're twice as big and they're really mean. The knob on the nose is bigger, like a mute swan. Those are not the same species. So they come from the gray-leg goose, which is from Siberia and Europe, and they were domesticated, and then they're really mean. They have that really awful, like, bike horn honk, kind of, yeah, I don't like them. Greater white-fronted, smaller, wild, you wouldn't see them in the same place. All right, 5 golden rings. Any guesses? It's right here. Oh, you're close. Golden eye. Everybody know golden eye? Couple of my favorite ducks. Come on, clicker. There you go. They are beautiful. The males are so cool, and the females are so cryptic and match the woods. So these are cavity nesters, just like mergansers are. So they nest in holes in trees. Common is the one we're going to see in Nebraska. Oh, Jason, you're ruining everything. Let's back up. Got to learn how to use my clicker before I come present next time. There we go. All right. So this is the common goldeneye. Bright irises on those birds, right? You can see them from a long ways away. And the males really stick out on the deep lakes. We'll see common because they will pretty much, any deep reservoir lake in the winter, if there's open water, they're usually out there. They're very quiet. Actually, the noise you most ever hear from goldeneye is when they fly over. They are one of those birds that has a very whistling of their wings as they fly over, and you can pick that out pretty good. But they don't quack a lot. They do have one. It's a little bit like a nasally. It's like kind of buzzy. But they don't talk that much. Now, this bird, the Barrow's goldeneye, we rarely see here, and I haven't looked up if we even have records of them in Nebraska. If we did, I would assume it would have to be way out west in a deep reservoir because they don't really get very far from the mountains. They like big, high up mountain lakes, and then they head south to the coasts. Both birds also like the salty water in the winter, so they'll go to the coasts or the Gulf to winter. But really cool. And they've got those big sort of thicker diving duck beaks because they'll go way to the bottom. They'll even get clams and mussels. They will eat crawfish, a lot bigger than some of our other dabbling ducks like mallard and things like that. Really cool birds. And I'm telling you, you can pick that eye out from a long ways away. And the way to tell them apart, if you can notice, is this one is a crescent moon. It's shaped like a crescent on the front, the white patch, and this one is a circle. And then the female, she looks like she's got like a flat forehead for some reason. It's like going this way. Cool birds. All right, we're almost there. A couple more. 4 calling birds. Do you remember from the very beginning? Anybody remember what it was? It was originally collie. Any guesses of what that means? I didn't know either. I thought this was super cool. So it was originally 4 collie birds, and collie was the shortened or British way to say collie. And so it was the color of, and that's the very famous and very common English blackbird. Many of our blackbirds are named blackbirds and actually aren't related to this bird because they look like it. A beautiful singer over in Europe. But yeah, that's where the song comes from. It's actually referencing 4 collie birds, 4 blackbirds. But I chose something else, of course, being like me. Since it's calling, had to pick our corvids, right? Our jays and crows, because they call all the time. And this gives me a chance to do some of my favorite noises. Are you guys ready? Anybody want? You don't want to hear any noises, right? Okay. So these are some of my favorites. First, these guys get no love, and I love my blue jays. Most people don't. And they get in trouble because they're super smart, right? Most of the corvids live and work in teams because mom and dad will still have aunt and uncle that are helping feed the babies. Once they've had young, if they have another nest the same year, those brothers and sisters will help feed the babies. They work in family units. When anybody gets in a gang, then they get themselves in trouble, right? Then they figure out how to do things together that people are like, hey, get out of there. But really cool, and they make all those great noises, right? If you get the chance, all of these birds make so many more noises. If there is a crow or a raven or a jay around, take the chance to sit if you have the time and listen. They purr, they click, they murmur. Like, there are so many crazy noises these birds can make. My favorite, though, before we move on, is sound is a great way to tell these three birds apart. Now, we only have American crows here in Lincoln. Way out west, very rarely will we get a common raven, or if you go way farther east too, like up in northern Minnesota, etc. But we usually don't see them here. But size helps, but if you're not seeing both of them at the same time, sometimes it's hard to tell. And then fish crows, south and east. But if you hear them, very different. So common raven, really big, sounds really scary, right? That's that rook bird that you hear from the Tower of London, right? They're really scary, and they sound like it. Ho, ho, ho. It's really low and kind of cavernous. Then American crow, pretty obvious, right? That's that famous caw, ah, 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 right? And then fish crow sounds almost the same, because they're practically the same bird, except they've got a cold. Ah, ah, ah. It's literally what they sound like. It just sounds like someone took the American crow and stuffed its nose a little bit. So really fun. Most of these others are all Western birds. We do have, we're actually, Audubon is working with Game and Parks right now on studying pinyon jays in Nebraska, because they used to be much more numerous out west. Ultimately, probably because we don't have enough of the type of pines that they like, and we've replaced it with eastern red cedars, or cedars have taken over, which they don't like. But really awesome birds and super smart. I love my corvids. Black-billed magpie, too. Everybody seen those? We do have them in Nebraska out west. We used to have them right here in Lancaster County. Yeah.
Our backyard at Cambridge by
Nice.
Lake. I had a pair for a day.
Nice. They used to be pretty numerous, not too far from here. They were one of the species really, really hit hard with West Nile when West Nile came through. The corvids took a big hit, but magpies just never quite came back. There are still plenty, though, if you go further west. Lots of them. All right, last couple. 3 French hens. Originally, it was those, which we don't have in Nebraska, unless someone's raising them, right? Those are some French-Canadian faveroles. Quite cute, and not wild, obviously. I chose the heath hen. Anybody know the heath hen? Remember? Yes, they are. Who are they related to? Do you remember? Prairie chicken. They are ultimately not actually their own species. So the heath hen was a subspecies of, they may have, had they lasted longer, become their own species because they were separate. The Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River kind of, there was an eastern race of greater prairie chicken that lived from New Hampshire down to Virginia, mostly along the coast in the heath areas. And then in the late 1800s, they were just really overhunted. They were sort of poor man's food. They weren't like pheasant and some of the other fancy foods in restaurants, but anyone could just shoot them. There was like not really a season. You could just hunt them. And they were unfortunately overhunted. And all of a sudden, by the 20s, 1920, the only ones left were on Martha's Vineyard on the island. They tried to keep them going for a long, long time, but it just didn't work. So the heath hen, unfortunately, went extinct. Luckily, we still have greater prairie chickens, and we have pretty good numbers in Nebraska, and really fun dancers, right? If you've got a chance to see them, if you haven't, I highly recommend it because that is amazing. And then watch an indigenous person do the dance of the prairie chicken in honor of them because it's amazing also. Yes, sir?
I've got some prairie chickens in Johnson County.
It's awesome. Yeah, I wish. We used to have a lek at Spring Creek, a very small one. It was never very large. But I think just development around us and, management changes, we haven't had them around. We see females once in a while because we know they winter at Spring Creek. I know Burchard still has a lek down there. And then the best one is Calamus. If you get out to Calamus Outfitters as well, they've got great tours and a really active lek to watch them dance. But yeah, heath hen, sad story, really cool bird. All right, last couple. 2 turtle doves. I didn't have to rename that one. But what is a turtle dove? Do we have turtle doves? If you go around Nebraska, will you see a turtle dove? Every so often, people will call a dove that or say they've seen a turtle dove. Most likely not. They rarely ever survive in the wild. Turtle dove is more a name for the domestic pet version of one of these. Most likely, the African turtle dove or the Barbary dove from Africa. They do look similar to one we're going to talk about. And then this is the European turtle dove, which is still wild. But this is the species that was domesticated, lots of pets. So in the United States, if there is a turtle dove, and it actually is a turtle dove, it's probably not going to last long in the wild. And it probably was some magician's pet that got out of his hat, right, and got loose. So should probably not be out there. We do have some amazing wild doves, though. We have beautiful mourning doves right there, which I love, these birds. Anybody know if that's the male or the female? There's a way to tell. Sort of an underrated bird just because they're pretty common. A lot of people love the noise, right? And they get that name because of that very mournful sound. This is the male because he wears the makeup. He's got all of the blue on and he's got this pinky sheen. She'll be brown and mostly not quite as pretty in the coloration and a little smaller, not necessarily, but I always love their bright reddish pink feet too. Eurasian collar dove now has a interesting or infamous title. It is the most successful invasive bird species in the country. It used to be the house sparrows, right, which are actually on a decline, and the starling, which are very much everywhere. But no one has proliferated as fast as the Eurasian collar dove. Let me show you that stat. That is fast. We didn't even have them in the United States since the 1980s. That's insane.
Why they were brought to the U.S.?
This was an accident. So there was a pet store that had them illegally in the Bahamas, which if you know where the Bahamas are, is not far from Florida. There was a storm and they all got loose and the person went, meh, let them go instead of trying to catch them all. And many of them got to Florida. And if you know what doves and pigeons do, they had a lot of little ones and they have loved the United States. And literally since the 1980s, there are only 2 states that don't have them, obviously Alaska and Hawaii. And Alaska will have them soon because they have been seen in British Columbia. So they are very, very successful. Currently, though, the studies, this is something Audubon has looked at, is it super worried about them displacing mourning doves? They just are actually displacing pigeons and starlings in urban areas because they tend to not like as wild as mourning doves do. So currently, they're not super worried. That is not the case in Spain. There is a native dove in Spain, and the Eurasian collar doves have taken all their habitat. But here, they are finding a balance. They seem to have a slightly different niche than our mourning dove.
So how often, I've never heard one in Lincoln.
Eurasian collar dove?
Right.
Oh yeah, we have them all over the place.
I've heard it in Cardiff, but I hadn't heard it.
Yep, we have them all over. They're a larger, whiter version of the mourning dove. Sometimes you just don't notice. Or they can be slightly with pigeons, and they may look like a big pigeon because they're very large. I always think they sound a lot like another dove or an owl even, but like with a cold or like they've been smoking all their lives. They're hoo, 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 like they're coughing. They're fun. All right, and our final bird of the night, right? The famous partridge in a pear tree. I didn't have to choose because we have gray partridge. Are they native to Nebraska? They are not. That's another one of those birds like the pheasant that we brought in for hunting for recreation. They get this fun little nickname, though. I learned, again, as a kid, I learned them as Huns. They were just Huns. Never knew until I was much older that that was from Hungarian partridge, the real name, the area of the world they really come from, over by Hungary. And that's where that comes from. And then they, in the United States, they are called the gray partridge. And you can spell that with an A or an E. I have found it many ways. But really cute. We do have them north central Nebraska, along the Niobrara. They like it in the open areas up there. I don't think we have them in Lancaster County that I've ever heard of, but I think you have to get north and up along the river and up towards South Dakota. Really, really cool birds. And with that, I feel like I should make you all sing the song. Try to remember the birds. But I hope you had a little fun. I hope you enjoyed and learned some things about birds. Don't forget the Christmas bird count is coming up. So if you'd like to count, you don't even have to go outside. If you've got feeders, you can count your feeders if you'd like. We always need more feeder counters. We can use a few people to count just a little area in your neighborhood. So join us on Sunday the 18th. Linda has been gracious, and she's going to host us here after the count. We're going to have some pizza that Audubon is providing, and we're going to tell everybody what we saw and how warm up if it's cold out, that kind of thing. And yeah, any questions about the 12 birds of Christmas or any other bird at any time? Yeah, Tim? Oh, do you need the microphone?
Yeah, we'll get the microphone. That way the people at home can hear.
Oh, Bruce has got one. Go ahead.
Was the ivory-billed woodpecker ever in Nebraska?
No. I think the range only went to basically the southeast. I would say northern Louisiana, Alabama area. They were pretty much that whole sort of swampy, timbered area.
My question is, what makes the Eurasian collared dove so successful in replacing or taking?
Yeah, that's a good question. My thought is, because other than our mourning dove, now if you go south of us, it's not as successful because all the other dove niches are taken, right? If you go to Texas, there is the white-tipped dove. There is, oh, I can't even name them, a white-winged dove. There are so many other species, and they're all feeding and working at other niches. That Eurasian collared dove has found, though, a niche in every place it can go. So it's a generalist. It can eat so many things. It breeds all year long. So a lot of the doves and pigeons are very successful wherever they're at. So that's one, right? I can have babies. As long as there's food, I'm going to have babies all year long instead of one season. So that's two. The other is climate. That's what they're showing. I mean, literally, if that bird would have been released back when starlings were, I don't think it would have been quite as successful, right? There would have been areas that just the climate weren't going to allow it to go into. And now we've warmed just enough temperatures. We've got areas opened up that it likes instead of dense forests. We don't have a lot of dense forest left, especially in the central part of the country, or didn't have it, and it just does really well. And it doesn't mind people. I mean, it comes to feeders, it likes urban areas. I feel like any bird that likes urban areas is going to do well over the next 100-some years, right? Good question. Anybody else? Yeah.
Just like,
I forgot how to pronounce it, that bird that you said where billions of them go out to sea.
Oh, yeah.
What would they be eating out there?
Great question. So that's the phalaropes.
Phalaropes.
Yep, that's the one where the females are all brightly colored. The phalaropes eat a lot of macroinvertebrates. So most likely, and I'd have to look this up, but the red phalarope that goes to sea, I bet you is eating plankton. Most likely. It's such a numerous creature on the planet. It's such a cool thing, and like so many animals. Like if plankton went off the planet, we'd be in trouble, because the whole ocean ecosystem would crash, and then a whole bunch of birds that need it would crash. The animals that eat those are like, plankton is so ridiculously important, but that would be my guess. I'd have to look it up for sure. It's got to be that, though, or tiny macroinvertebrate insects, too. That's what the ones here eat. A great place in the United States to see all the phalaropes when they're migrating is the Great Salt Lake, if it had water. It's a little dry right now, but when it has water and is very salty, all three of those phalaropes migrate through, and you can just see millions of birds going like this. It's really crazy. Any more questions? Well, awesome. Thank you guys so much. I love being invited to come enjoy some drinks and cookies and things afterwards, and I'll stay around a bit if you have any other bird questions or thoughts. And yeah, happy holidays too, everybody. Thank you so much.
I think everyone knows why Jason is called the bird nerd and why he's the senior educator out at Spring Creek. He knows a lot about birds, and I love the calls. I wish we could have a potluck tonight like we've done in past years. Hopefully maybe next year we can at Christmas, but we do have cookies and treats out there. So enjoy the fellowship. We've got the treats are outside the door here. We've got coffee, hot cider, and water also. So again, thanks for coming tonight. Oh, one more. The sign-in sheet. If you didn't sign in, please sign in out at the front desk so we can keep track of who came and visited us tonight. And thanks everybody online, and we'll see you next month.